So the questions which I was going to ask were, how many editors do we have? And then what percentage of them are actually currently competent to add to Wikidata? I'm just almost ready to do some myself, so I would not number myself as one of the active contributors yet. But I think that and looking at the attendance of the Zoom, there's a strong negative correlation between how old the attendee is and how long they hung in through this part. So the first people that we lost were the most senior people. So speaking to all HGAPers at this point, this is where you guys
Sorry,
are.
also I just want to say keep reporting, recording according to Anna.
Got it. The you guys are a major growth potential factor here because you guys hung in through this and you're like, yeah, this doesn't look so hard, and a bunch of you are actually trying it and doing it. And so the technical editor position, a core part of that is taking articles that are written by content experts and converting them to Wiki if they're not all the way there, which Emma and Caroline and other people of Nick have actually helped with the actual articles. And then what we just saw tonight was the Wiki data part, integrating it more into the database. And you have some understanding of the implications that has for psychology being more discoverable by Siri and Alexa and Google. The the thing that just occurred to me for Sean and Lizzie and the projects that you guys have been working on, if the assessment center had its own wiki data identifier, then for an entry on a measure like the GBI or the SITB, one of the modifiers could be available in, and then list languages that are available, available from OSF, scoreable version in Assessment Center. And so if we add those objects, make those connections, then somebody doing a Siri search would actually be able to find the assessment center more easily.
Yeah, and it'd show up on like potentially on a neat little box at like the top of the screen.
Yeah.
You know, like that'd be so cool. Even like if they don't get directed to the assessment center, getting like info up top about an assessment in like way.
So it should direct to the assessment center because one of the items in the Wikidata description of it should be, I'll just cancel what I've just been doing, should be official website. Did I add that in the end? For Eric? No, I didn't. But for example, actually, HGAPS has got a Wikidata item that does have that. So let's go HGAPS. Yep, here we go. Helping give away psychological science. It's a psychological information charity. It's an instance of a charitable organization. It was inception 2015, no reference for that. That's a downside. We've got the founders. But we have an official website here, which means that, for example, that Google Knowledge box will know when it's talking about HGAPS, it should point people through to hgaps.org as the official website kind of main landing page location. Let's see if that's true if I Google HGAPS. Oops.
So Laura was asking like why the gap with CBT versus, and is it because psychology is more subjective, so it's harder to verify stuff, or is it, to me it seems like it's PsycInfo not open, and you surprised me that Crossref not open, And so like everywhere that we've been putting our science, we've been giving it to publishers and letting them put it behind a paywall.
ORCID is open. ORCID is a good counterexample to that.
But the and what Thomas didn't show us tonight that Wilson has seen, because it was in a marathon after party, Thomas showed me a couple tools that will automate parts of this and move batches of things. So the ORCID that he just mentioned, one of the things that we've been doing in the background is for all the board members on HGAPS, we looked them up on ORCID. We pulled all of their citations out of ORCID into our Zotero, and we have those queued up to add to the Wikidata. And so tools to move it in batches. To Sean's point of, oh wow, we have our work cut out for us. We do, but there are tools that'll speed up big parts of this in ways that you guys will get the hang of very, very quickly.
So there are basically like the three main ways of putting information into Wikidata in batch is Python, R, or Excel, depending on which of those are your preferences.
Do you have a template for R?
I do. In fact, I was one of the developers for the R package.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool that there's an R package for it.
Which can read from Wikidata, it can write to Wikidata, it can query Wikidata. So it's at ts404/wikidata-r. And it's got hopefully the examples in the README are pretty good. It also has vignettes for reading from Wikidata, but not yet writing to Wikidata in the vignette section. But there are examples for each of the functions. And I am happy to talk people's ear off and actually go through examples with them. But yeah, so this is, for example, how I imported all of the WikiJournal articles into Wikidata and associated the peer review URLs and the DOIs and all of that sort of information. I moved that all across using R.
Can you
in a big batch
in the chat, and then I'll add that to the Google Doc?
Yep, going in now.
Thank you.
And I wonder, Thomas, about like a brief, I hate to impose on your schedule, but like a 30-minute workshop or consult, even as Emma and Cody and some of us try playing with the R thing or moving batches out of Zotero. Caroline Vincent has trained up a team of people that are getting very fast at adding lots of things to Zotero. So we have the HGAPS shared library has 5,500 things in it right now. And so teaching us how to move chunks of that into Wikidata could be a very quick win.
Yeah, very good point. So the main gap in that whole process currently is avoiding making duplicate items. So identifying which of those items in the Zotero library already has a Wikidata item for it and which ones don't. And it'll be a complete mix, and it varies wildly from field to field. So that's kind of a starting point necessity on that. And there will be, obviously you can do that manually, but that will be super tedious. The quicker way to do it is going to be through R or something equivalent. And you can either do that by DOIs. If they all have DOIs, that's really easy. We can just search for all of those DOIs in R. All of those DOIs within Wikidata. And for items that don't have DOIs, particularly some of the older literature, and particularly some of the things outside the kind of the main, I guess, hard sciences corpus, it's the idea of DOIs has only more recently become commonplace, in which case it's possible to do, again, a mass search just by title, and we can search using R for every single title on that list within within Wikidata to find out which ones do and which ones don't, and then filter that list just to the ones that don't yet already exist in Wikidata. For the ones that do already exist in Wikidata, there will still likely be problems, and the most common problem is author disambiguation. When there's some author, John Smith, on the author list, Wikidata does the conservative thing and lists them as author name string, the text John Smith. But of course, what we actually want to do is, just them being called John Smith isn't the important part. We're wanting to link it to the specific Wikidata item as author, this particular John Smith, the John Smith who works in psychology at University of Texas in 2020. And so that kind of author disambiguation is luckily done really simply through the author disambiguator tool, which I've shown Eric before and can do a couple of demos for if that's useful to do again.
What we're over time, but we're getting to stuff that's really exciting in terms of the application and implications. If you're game, I would love to do a second shorter one, sort of picking up here, and if we were going to pause here, what for people to practice, what would be 2 or 3 ways of trying to practice this? Because you've showed me all of this before, and then I came back 72 hours later and I couldn't remember how to do any of it. So thank you, Wilson, for editing the video down. But if we were going to if we wanted to practice the skill, what would be some safe ways of doing it? And if people were interested in applying for the technical editor position, especially people with editing experience on Wikiversity, next steps with that, and any other parting thoughts?
Yeah. Gotcha. So the 2 things in terms of practice is on the slides that I linked in the Google document, there's actually 2 additional example exercises that you can do in that, which will absolutely cover some of those practice things. So we were doing the example exercise on adding topics to theses. There's also one on adding dates to theses, which is very similar, but usually way less ambiguous. And there's also, and that's a useful practice item. And then there's also one about mass changing lots of items all simultaneously. And that one uses a tool called Quick Statements, which is essentially the universal way of getting tabular data into Wikidata. So that you can move, so that's what any Excel file, any CSV file can be used as the starting point to get a whole load of information simultaneously into Wikidata. Through Quick Statements, and it's also actually the intermediate language that the Wikidata R package in R actually uses. It's just using the Quick Statements API behind the scenes, and it's using matrices, data frames, or tibbles within R, and then submitting that data into Wikidata in batch. So for people who like R, I would definitely be happy to do at some point a quick demo of that, and I'm happy to schedule that in for a later stage, and we can do a couple of examples to just kind of show what sort of things can be done. And the additional thing that you can do for practice in terms of tools that touch Wikidata and do a lot of mass edits, but aren't actually even interacting with, you're not interacting with Wikidata directly, is to have a go at that author disambiguation tool, authordisambiguator.toolforge.org, and it'll even just give you these random examples of, these are some examples of people who need disambiguating, or you can just go to an author that
Penicillin guy.
Yeah, interesting. Alexander Fleming as a string still needs some items attached to them, because they.
Sorry, I was going to. Wikipedia is so fast because the Juno star, previously known as Ellen Page, just as Elliot Page. And I go to look, and it's all of the pronouns. Everything on Wikipedia has been changed over and then listed all of the all of her when all of his awards when he was a she as Ellen Page's like awards. So
interesting.
So I wonder if they've done like disambiguation on Elliot Page.
And if it gets changed on Wikidata, that pipes through to many other wiki platforms, right?
That's exactly it. So in fact, for example, when you ask Alexa to tell me the latest film that Elliot Page is in, it will say his latest film is blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Like it will infer the pronouns from their information on Wikidata.
That's what it was doing in the info box. It was already filling it in.
And so, I mean, this is actually a really good example of indicating sex or gender based on a reference. So it's specifically saying, here's the reference URL. It was retrieved 1st of December 2020. And in fact, here's the specific quote, additionally telling you the language that that quote is in to justify it, to make sure that there's no room for interpretation. And it's like, oh, yep, here we go. Pronouns are he, they.
Yes.
Identifies as trans.
They actually said, I was about to say, do they put they? Because I remember they said they.
Yeah. Yep, here we go. Preferred pronoun.
Yeah.
He, they, announcement dates, references, quotations, blah, 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 blah. You know, which is, of course, very different from the sort of reference that's going to be used nominated for Academy Award Best Actress reference this date. Oh, no, that's bad. That is bad practice imported from Wikipedia. So in the early days of Wikidata, a lot of information was pulled from Wikipedia. And so you can see these are some of the old references. So actually, I would like a better reference for that than imported from English Wikipedia. That's pretty poor form. But eventually that stuff's going to all get changed over.
Or something.
So that's a way of practicing using the author disambiguator. The exercises in this PowerPoint show include some bulk editing items at once in Wikidata by going to this public document here and then copying rows of this spreadsheet into quick statements and then hitting run, and it'll put them all through and it'll add it to Wikidata. So those are probably going to be the easiest ways of actually doing a little bit of practice. And the last thing that was asked for our final 5 minutes is the technical editor side of things. The technical editor within WikiJournals is a mixture of bringing Wikidata up to date for WikiJournal articles, the authors, the editors, the peer reviewers to do with Wikidata articles. So I mentioned that, you know, when we're stating who was the peer reviewer for an article, we're drawing that data from Wikidata. But of course, that requires us to know, well, what's their employer? What's their affiliation? What's their ORCID ID? All of that information has to be checked on Wikidata to make sure that it's up to date. There's also tasks just within Wikidata that, within WikiJournals that are very standard editorial roles that are done at lots of different journals to do with handling of articles, when peer reviews get submitted, making sure that the handling editor has been informed, making sure that the authors have been informed in case they didn't happen to be watching the page. That sort of information, and all of the steps are listed on this page that I can stick in the Zoom chat as well, which is this process summary. And it's kind of split into these kind of four main categories of newly submitted articles, new editorial applications, submitted peer reviews, and accepted articles. And the final category of things that is in here that is outside of Wikiversity and outside of Wikidata is things like depositing metadata into Crossref, so like creating and minting DOIs. You'll get taught how to do that. And also copy editing and typesetting of fancy looking PDFs for articles. So it's basically just a copy and paste job currently, but no, wrong one. It's basically a copy and paste job currently, but using where is it? Yep, using these docx templates, which are just a whole load of formatting templates where you copy and paste information, copy and paste the text from Wiki into this, and it formats it up into a nice looking article. That gets, that's the sort of thing that people end up actually, downloading into their Zotero or Mendeley libraries.
When you become an editor, do you get access to this Google account?
Yep. So the technical editors will be given access to passwords and confidential links, which currently I can click on because I'm logged in. But when you get accepted as a technical editor, you also get access to that, and that will have the password for the Google group. It'll have the passwords that we use for depositing information, DOI information into Crossref. Has a couple of other passwords for Cope and things like that. It's got the Twitter password in it, I think, as well. So it's got a few bits and pieces for actually how that all works behind the scenes. Okay.
Yeah, that's good to know that there's like a resource that you can go to find that stuff at.
Yeah. And so for the technical editor, there's essentially, it's a pretty easy application process. Oh, sorry, wrong page. It's a pretty easy application process. If I just click on apply here, and again, I'll stick this note there, and it's just going to ask what things have you done that are relevant, and a small declaration about I'm going to act in accordance with policies of the user group. And it provides some requests for the sort of information that would be useful.
So they should link to their Wiki account, if they've been involved with HGAPS, reference the user group.
Yeah, so when applying, please include the following: your username and or name, relevant experience, to any experience that's relevant to the role, including like anything that you've had as formal education, but also participation in anything similar in any kind of publishing or technical processing role, and then that final statement there. And so you can see a couple of examples that people have put in from already existing applications. And the next voting discussion on that, I think, is on the 7th of December, which can act as a sort of a reasonable soft deadline for making that decision. And it should have on this description page also the current payment rate. So it's currently done on a per hourly basis, although there is discussion about collating information about how long different tasks tend to take, and replacing hourly payment with a payment on a per task basis. But that's a kind of an upcoming discussion and decision, and anyone who goes for the technical editor role would be informed well ahead of time of any kind of changes like that, and it would work out to being the same effective rate of pay or higher. The aim would be to strongly avoid any kind of way in which this is just used to reduce people's actual income from this process.
So I do have a question. I think I remember hearing that there was a minimum 5-hour time requirement, but is there a maximum, or?
So that's not a minimum time requirement. The maximum expected time would probably be 5 hours a week for it. So that was just a likely expected amount of time. I can't remember whether that's actually stated here, but yes, so 5 hours a week is the likely maximum, and the minimum would be 0 if you were particularly busy in a given week, but some weeks might be as low as 1. And it'll be a mixture of tasks that have kind of like that are time sensitive. So for example, when new peer reviews come in, it's pretty important to have that information, like to have the peer reviewers information updated in Wikidata within a day or so. So that ends up being relatively time critical. And so that information is just going to basically get posted onto a constantly updating board, and whichever technical editor gets to it first claims that task and and signs it off under their tasks that they've done, whereas other tasks will be less time critical. For example, formatting up a PDF, or updating editor information in Wikidata, or going through and copy editing articles and things like that. Or even assigning DOIs will be the sort of thing that can be done over like a 3-day period, and formatting up PDFs is the sort of thing that can be done over a 7 to 14-day period. And again, those will go up on a notice board, and people can kind of claim those items and give like expected times when they plan to be able to do them.
So I'm hearing very high flexibility in terms of number of hours and when the activity gets done, and the $20 an hour, very clear. It's 20 US dollars.
Yeah, that's 20 US dollars. Yeah, everything is currently in US because it doesn't make sense to translate into multiple currencies.
If you get a group of people that come out of this event and are interested, and their applications are reviewed and they're accepted, do you anticipate like having a kickoff meeting or a boot camp to walk through several things? Or
yeah, we will probably have a kickoff meeting or a couple of meetings in December in order to onboard, and then things would sort of get active in earnest in 2021.
that sounds great.
And also, to be clear, this will be a role that is shared between the multiple journals. So it would be between WikiJournal of Science, of Medicine, of Humanities, and possibly of Psychology, Psychiatry, and Behavioral Sciences, if that if WikiJSci with a PSY takes off.
I have a suggestion for a different name.
Mm-hmm.
I think it should be like mental health science, something like shorter and more inclusive or something.
Oh, interesting.
And she agrees.
So I have no strong opinions on that. I'd only be in a very advisory role for it.
I think that there are a lot of potential advantages to that. The stakeholder group that I would want to canvas about it first is probably the people that would be likely to be editors. So talking with people, because they're the way that things are going in the background. We have a large, I'm not worried about number of articles that would get submitted. And with the technical editors and with the people involved in HGAPS being comfortable with the editing, what we're already seeing with Dr. Daughters and Dr. Chung, and people working on the substance paper, and is that the hybrid team with early career people and students and content experts, that's been a really positive experience. So I'm not worried about authors as the scarce commodity. I'm not worried about about getting the stuff onto Wiki anymore, but getting people to agree to do the reviews and to think about sending more stuff. So Emma's suggestion makes a ton of sense to me, and psychiatry and psychology, it would be it's a delicate dance to have both of them in the name. And Dr. Delis Reyes also was like, you should be talking to nursing, you should be talking to social work. So I think it's a really, really good suggestion. It's different than what's been floated around so far, but it's not too late. I think it makes a ton of sense. And that's sort of the group. It's a small group that I'm like, definitely we should talk.
Because all of them are mental health professionals, so
Yep.
that's what they all have in common.
I completely agree. The flip side is, yeah, no, that's a great suggestion and a lot of thoughts that I'll sort of, in the interest of letting people get on with their night, I won't go into now, but definitely rock my world there.
Yeah, I agree, and I have to say I quite like it as a thematic grouping as well, because it avoids the listing, which is always going to be necessarily incomplete.
Yep.
By
drop
focusing
that on the Google Doc, Emma.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm gonna Lizzie just said something about like education, so it could be like mental health science or mental health education or something like that. So
is it, being blunt, the psychiatry has the highest impact factor of those disciplines, and psychology has the next most. And as we add more and more and more, the impact factors of all of those journals are lower. So if we go too broad or we do this wrong, the Matt Knox and other people are going to look at that and they're going to be like, why would I send stuff there?
I mean, I'm just thinking I would feel that way if I saw psychiatry, like, oh, well, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't identify with that. So, or I might have like some preconceived like stereotype.
I completely agree. So this is me speaking as somebody who's spent decades in here. And so if you're following the impact factor or you're following the grant funding, or historically, psychology, like if you work in a medical school, it's unusual to feel like a peer. Which I'm not saying I'm definitely not saying that's right or that's like what I want to perpetuate. I'm just like, as we're trying to start something new, trying to think of what's the most effective way of getting where we're trying to go. All right, so you showed us the application. You showed us a lot. I'm very glad. I hope I didn't screw up the recording. I threw into the chat the link to the HGAPS user group. If some of you mentioned that in your application, I personally would be grateful, because Thomas on the down low flicked me a comment from Wiki Project Medicine where somebody said, people asked me to help out with the HGAPS new user group, but it looks like a zombie. We don't see any activity. And so I'm trying to figure out easy ways to raise our visibility and perceived activity. So just adding that link to your application. Looks less zombie-like already. Brush, brush.
Well, I'm on it.
All right, other questions, other thoughts? Way to go, bitter enders.
Yeah.
I'm looking for I'm about to say
I
thank
mean,
you.
the other thing, the other thing to note is that the meeting coming up on the 7th of December is an open meeting, so anyone's allowed, like, you're all allowed to drop in on that if it's the sort of thing that would be interesting for an hour, and that's where some of this discussion will be occurring.
Could we also add that on our application that we went to one of the meetings?
If you went to one of the meetings previously, you can absolutely stick that on the application. So it is at that meeting where we'll also be asking the current editorial boards to vote on the applications that are already up.
So a lot.
Then I
So
can,
so
okay.
so a lot.
So it might end
lot
up being circular.
lot potentially going on at this meeting. So the people that apply for the technical editor position now, that'll be one of the items. The proposed new journal is another one of the items. It would be cool. It would be cool to have you guys there. I have slightly mixed feelings about Caroline trying to go because it's early in the morning, and
Caroline, are you a West Coaster?
no, she's
I'm not, but that's my circadian rhythm. So yeah. I also think adding to that, if people apply and then you would almost hear feedback on your application is what I'm kind of hearing, or you would at least hear why they picked the people they did if they, don't specifically mention why they didn't pick you. So it could be good.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not going to be a discussion of the individuals, but it will more be, firstly, it'll be a call to action where the editorial board members will be asked, okay, please go and vote now. But it will also be a, how many applicants do we want? If we have 20 people, there's probably not enough tasks for 20 people. So there will be a discussion of how many people in total do we want, because previously it was just one person, but one person did find it too much work. That's sort of
living.
Sorry?
Is that one person still living?
Yeah, that one person is still living.
That's so hard.
But they had a number of other similar roles that they were actually doing at the same time, and they were one of the officers for Wikimedia Ghana. And Wikimedia Ghana has just gone from having 0 full-time staff to having, I think, like 4 full-time staff. So it's like really taken off.
Okay, so we should probably have our applications in by December 6th then?
That would be the ideal situation, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, this was a squeeze in this workshop just in time.
Oh, yes. That's not many days away. I just realized that. Okay.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'm about to stop recording. So let's thank Dr. Shafee one more time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No worries, everyone. It's always good to chat.